You have written two chapters on grief on your latest book, and also there is an article. It's what do you say before you say goodbye? I remember that was one of the first materials I read on grief from you.
That chapter was published in the book Relational Patterns, Therapeutic Presence. And it was about working with clients who have anticipatory grief. They know that their parent is in their 80s, but they are still alive. They're still fairly well, or they might be getting sick, and they're anticipating the death of someone. Um, and that's what we mean by anticipatory grief. And it is working with that person to rebuild an intimate, meaningful communication between them. And the
Mm,
person is often reluctant to go talk to the person directly. So
yes.
with anticipatory grief, I often use an empty chair. Put your mother in that empty chair. Now tell her what you're feeling. Tell her what you've never said to her. And I'm particularly focused on helping them express their resentments and what they don't like. But
Mhm.
also, I want them to express their affection and what they love about the person and to find that balance. Now,
Mm,
Fritz Perls talked about finding that balance, but when I watched him work, he always focused only on the resentment. And
mm,
I modeled myself on that for a long time until one of my clients said to me, "You've got to talk about how much I love him. Even though he beat me, I still loved him." And so I started focusing more on the balance of the loving and the disliking and the importance of telling that in an empty chair. Now, that's really ideally a rehearsal because I often end that kind of work with, "Now go see him, go see your father, or go spend some time with your mother and tell her what you said here in this session today."
in reality, so we encourage.
Yes, to really put it into action.
Okay.
Yeah. So that the work with the empty chair is really like a rehearsal for
Mhm.
how to have an honest communication with that person.
But you said it's anticipatory grief, like the person is still alive and they are preparing themselves for a goodbye.
Yeah. Yeah. Like my client said, my father had a stroke. He's recovered fine, but I realize in another couple of years he's going to die. But we never really talked to each other. I left home at time of university, and we've never had a real conversation since then.
Mhm.
And so then I facilitate that imagined new conversation in preparation for a real one.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes it's not possible to have that real one.
Or the other is not ready or prepared or willing to do.
They're unwilling to have it. Or as soon as the person tries to have it, they put up some blockage.
Yes.
Then we come back and do it again in imagination in the empty chair. And then maybe I have them do a two-chair technique where the father talks back and then the person talks to that. But it's all about truth telling and getting the story expressed out loud.
So by truth telling is the person's own narrative of the
Yes.
relationship, of the needs and desires that they had,
Mm, that's it. Yeah.
and kind of finishing the unfinished business, as
Yeah.
you said. So are there other types of grief? We now spoke about one of them.
Compounded grief,
Mhm.
protracted grief. What we just described was anticipatory,
Mhm.
a very recent grief that has just happened. Right. Using these kind of empty chair techniques, I think, are not good for a most recent grief. Someone who's just died, maybe the funeral hasn't even happened yet. Right?
Mhm.
What I want to do is just meet them face to face. And this is how I originally learned about dealing with grief when I was treating the survivors in a mass murder for their trauma, but also for the grief of the fellow students who they had lost. Um, and what I learned from Bob Neville, who was Carl Rogers' partner, is to be patient, to look them in the eye, to listen to them, to reflect back what they're feeling, to really put into practice that unconditional positive regard. And that's, I think, the best way to deal with recent grief that has just occurred. Right? It's very different than with protracted grief, where maybe somebody's been dead for 20 years and
Yeah.
people are holding on to that unexpressed feelings and stories.
Yeah. So when it's recent, the most important thing is your presence and uh, your
And
attunement in the moment.
then you can have complicated grief where you have many factors. Like I wrote in one of the chapters about a woman who came to see me, sent by her therapist because she'd come to deal with the death of her son, who was driving drunk, smashed the car. He died in the car. So did the other four boys in the car die. She had to deal with the police, the hospital, moving the body back home, the parents of the other boys angry at her and threatening a lawsuit. She had just complicated problems.
Mhm.
Saw her for one 2 hour session, and then the very next day, another 2 hour session. And
Mhm.
what I simply did was get her to tell me the story, get her to elaborate and to be fully present with her. I, I thought that using any of these techniques, like an empty chair, would not be appropriate in that
Mhm.
kind of grief.
And there are too many responsibilities or aspects the person is dealing with at the moment.
That's right. Yeah.
Mhm. And the protracted,
Protracted grief is where a person has been hanging on for years, and usually they have retroflected their own anger. They've given up. As my client says, "Oh, I'm just disgusted. I don't want to talk to my father." And I keep saying, "Come on, tell him what you don't like. Tell him what you have never said about being angry." And the work with protracted grief is getting the person to express the unexpressed anger and
Mhm.
also the unexpressed affection. And that's where using that empty chair becomes so essential. And because we're doing it in a safe environment.
that also reminded me of Freud's article, Mourning and Melancholia. It's about the anger that has been felt and uh, thrown back to the self
That's right. Yeah, yeah,
as the cause of depression.
that's right. Yeah. So what I want to do is activate that, to do something to undo the retroflexion of holding things in.
And it can take many sessions, right? So,
It can, it can. Um, the more the person can move their body and express their emotion,
mm,
probably better. So it's
mm,
not just an intellectual exercise.
okay. So at that body level, how it's felt.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and if they can let themselves cry, they can let themselves really express how angry they are.
Mhm.
Both of those become important.
Something that just came to my mind is about rituals and
Ah,
the importance of rituals, personal rituals after the grief.
yeah, I did write about a woman who's um, had an intentional abortion because she was going to have a baby who was born severely mentally handicapped, and they knew it. So she had an abortion, but she
Mm.
always mourned that baby for 15 years.
Wow.
I had her hold the cushion and have a conversation with the unborn baby. And she talked about how she loved that baby, how she would love to have been there to help it walk for the first time and to go to school and watch it get grow up and get married. And then she talked about saving her other children.
Mm.
She wouldn't have the time for them if she had to deal with a severely handicapped child. But she had never grieved because having an abortion was a crime, both religiously and legally. Uh,
Mm. Mm.
and so she could finally talk to this fetus in her imagination. Then this was done in a group. So what we had the group do then is create an imagined ceremony. Um, but with other people, I have them talk about what kind of shrine would they like to make. What kind of memorial would they like to make for the person? Or maybe that memorial is just in my mind or in the mind of the members in the group. But at least when we think about this person, we have an image of the significant other that they have lost.
Or something symbolic.
Yeah, yeah. Rituals become so important. So I'll often have the person create a ritual that we'll enact together.
Mm. Mm. Now that you were describing this, I also thought about cases that the grief is over a body part, or there is an illness or something, or an ability that the person has lost, or the years that have been passed.
I've had people put their mastectomy, the missing breast, in
Uh,
the and
wow.
talked. Recently, I had a woman do that, and she talked about her beautiful breast and how it meant her femininity, and it
Mm.
meant the loving with her children. It meant her sexuality. Um,
Mm.
and she had this conversation with her breast. And at the end of that conversation, she then turned to me and she said, "Okay, now I think ready for reconstructive surgery."
Wow. Okay.
But she had been postponing that reconstructive surgery for 2 years.
That's been blocked, this process. Kind
Yeah. I've done the same thing with people who have lost a good job.
of.
I have to talk about the fantasy of that job and what that job meant to them and the status uh, and grieving the loss of that job. Uh,
Or a dream, or or a
yeah,
dream.
a
Yeah.
dream. It can be body parts, dreams, uh, relationship. Uh, a common grieving is the loss of a love relationship. The person
Mm.
has died, but the couple has broken up.
Yeah.
And after I listen to the angry part of it, which is important to also listen to, I'll often have the person say, "Tell me when you first met. Tell me what was first attracted to you. And let's talk about that first kiss or that
Mm.
first love making and when you were first together." All right. What I'm looking for is the person to realize that they're holding on to the dream of the relationship, maybe not the actual person. My client says, "Oh, now my husband in the beginning was wonderful, but then he started drinking, and once he started in on the alcohol, I resented the relationship. I didn't like it." She's still holding on because she's
Right.
holding on to the dream of what he used to be.
Yeah. And the same principle, like you said, whether it's recent, it's complicated, or the same goes for each kind of these griefs. Right. When it's recent.
Principle running through it all is the truth telling. And it's important in truth telling to oneself and the
Mm.
truth telling out loud. I think that's the essential ingredient in working with grief.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Bye for now.